screen. Hi, Jackie. She can't hear you, so I'm going to explain that next. Before we begin, can I just say that we just give a massive round of applause to all the volunteers of today. To Frampton Park Baptist Church, can I just say that this feels to me like home. I'm a counselor in this ward. My name is Claudia Turbet-Delof. Migrants, proudly migrant, and of course proudly left the Labour Party when I was suspended for supporting Palestine, and of course I left the party, and of course I'm here moving, growing in the movement of alternative to a complicit Labour Party. So I just wanted to add that. Can I just say that, Joseph, can I just come and explain the video you wanted to explain? Can we give a massive round of applause for Joseph? So Joseph is your family, your friends. Joseph, thank you so much for everything you do for our community and always making this a space available. You have a special message for us.
No, thank you. Just housekeeping, really. So good evening, everybody. Really great to have you here in this building. So we're not doing any fire exercise. So in case the alarm goes off, 1, 2 will be your exit. And then in case you want to use the toilet, you have one on this floor, that's behind there, and you have more on the ground. And that'll be around this. Thank you.
We go to life, yeah? Thank you so much. Right, so we're going to explain very briefly. I'll be the host for tonight, so I won't be doing much of the speaking. We have a wonderful panel today, and I'll explain now the program, okay? So the first thing we're going to do is that we're having a panel with these wonderful comrades here and activists and leaders of our community who will set out what's happening now within the immigration system so that we can have a context as to why we're here today. The next thing we're going to do, we're going to do that for maximum 30 minutes. Then we're going to go into group work. Because the wonderful thing about this alternative what's happening for the UK is that all of us, all our voices matter. So we're going to go into subgroups. There will be, I think, a group at least that is only Spanish-speaking group, and we have a translator as well, making sure that it's supporting the group. You see, justice of the language is really, really important, and this is where all migrant communities are included. Then we'll come back with all the feedback that you have. That group will talk about, you will choose what you want to talk about in terms of what you think is important that the new party commits and offers to our migrant communities. It's straightforward, it's quite simple and powerful. What do we need for the new party to commit for our migrant communities? We know what is happening now. We can see every day where political football for many of these horrendous, disgusting, imperialist, colonial parties that are using our name, capitalizing on our name to abuse us. So what we're going to do is to set out what we feel in our own lived experience in our communities that we want to see. Then we come back and give the feedback. We will have translators as well for people that only speak English. And then we're going to have the final panel where we're going to next steps. And then we're going to be joined as well by Jeremy on who will be telling us on what your party will be also hopefully committing to that very important founding conference. We will be having a screen very soon at some point with the people that want to join your party. I know that some of you have already joined and been telling us as they come along. So we'll have the opportunity for that, and I believe there is also a table for people that want to do it. We also have, just as a last announcement, we also have Migrant Democracy Project table at the back with information and reports, Migrant Rights Network, and we have as well here our fantastic trade union, IWGB. That's it. Are we excited to get started?
Yes.
Eso. Vamos. I'm so excited, thank you. Those that know me know that I love organizing events. So, because I've been doing that for so many years, I'm so excited to see you, especially on a Tuesday night. So thank you so much. I also want to acknowledge before we start, a lot of us on our communities, especially Latino communities, are outside the American Embassy, or North American Embassy, correction, today, at this very moment, saying no to the invasion to Colombia, Venezuela, and Latin American countries. We have been exchanging messages, and it's just a clash of dates, but I would have been there if it wasn't here today, and this likewise. And it's very important that we stand up for that. And tonight is also about migrants, refugees, and international solidarity. That's it. We're going to get started. We have Jackie online. I'm going to explain. Jackie cannot necessarily hear us, but she will present because she feels unfortunately unwell, but she's making such great effort to be with us tonight and share what she wanted to share. She's an expert, as you know, in human rights and migration law, and especially she became a massive leader with the Windrush generation and all that were affected by it. I can see people arriving. Welcome, bienvenidos. We have chairs at the back, so you can find yourself a chair and then please sit. So that's it, that's the format. So up to 7-8 minutes max, and then 7 minutes. Yes? Great?
Yeah.
¿Estamos listos?
Sure.
We're going to start with you, Saya. So to get started, what is happening now in the immigration system? What do you want to share with us within your organization, Migrant Democracy Project, which is a fantastic organization. But yeah, what do you want to share with us to get started?
Perfect. Shall I use that one?
Yeah?
Right. Hi, everyone. I've got that clipped here.
Oh,
Is
you've
that
got
right?
it.
Is that what you want?
Yeah, perfect.
So hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. It's lovely to see so many lovely faces in the crowd. Just before I start, I want to give a massive thank you to Claudia and to the space and the community for having us. We're really grateful to be part of this space and have this conversation with everyone. I'll start by just giving a little bit of a background of what. So we are an organisation that's building political power within migrant communities here in the UK. We want to build a collective future rooted in social justice, reflecting our needs and interests as migrant communities. And we do that through a number of ways. We do it through making sure that those of us who are eligible to vote in the room, mostly Commonwealth and some EU citizens, that we are registered to vote and we participate in the electoral decision making. And for those of us that can't, and of that there are millions, we're campaigning to demand that everyone, regardless of their nationality and where they were born, should have the right to vote and participate in our democracy. And, excitingly, we're getting migrant leaders elected. We've previously ran a leadership development program, Empower Local, that has supported a new generation of migrant leaders to run for local council. Really excitingly, 2 of our leaders were elected in 2024 in Colchester and Watford, and 3 more have officially been selected to stand in the London 2026 local elections in Islington, Newham and Havering. So come May, we will be out and busy. And we've recently launched 2 programs aimed at harnessing the skills within our communities. One to train up migrant leaders to organise within their communities in the Midlands and the north of England, and one facilitating leaders to stand as MPs in national elections in Parliament.
Amazing.
And we're doing that largely because we need political representatives who understand our lived experiences and who will share positive narratives on migration and promote progressive policies instead of pandering to the never-ending, it seems, amounts of hate out there. So if you are interested in finding more about any of those parts of our work, do come have a chat with us. Rosh is at the back. Wave, Rosha. So come have a chat during the discussion period. We'll be around after. Before I sort of get to the main conversation of where we are now, I want to kind of put in place where the migrant community is at large. And what I really want to drive home is how many of us there are out there. Migrants are a substantial core of our community across the UK. 1 in 6 residents in the UK are migrants, so that's around 10 million of us that are living here, calling the UK their home. So we have the numbers and the size and the people power to organise and be listened to, but that really isn't the case. I would say migrant and refugee rights are currently at an extremely dangerous precipice, one where now more than ever, migrant lives, our voices, they need to be platformed, protected and defended wholeheartedly. The rise of the fascist far-right threat, coupled with the acceleration of the hostile immigration policies, threaten the livelihoods and futures of hundreds of thousands of our community members. Migrants have been and continue to be villainized and used as political fodder in the conversation. And this ugly, racist, and largely unchecked rhetoric has only escalated in the last few years under consecutive governments. And I think if we look at sort of the past year alone and what has happened, we've seen a direct attack on the ability for migrants to settle in the UK. There have been further hikes on visa fees, thresholds, and rules that are just constantly changing. And I think it was just last month that the RMT were demonstrating because thousands of their workers are at risk because what essentially the Home Office has done is just removed loads and loads of jobs under the skilled visa route, which are now threatening thousands of workers with deportation and removals. And these are residents that have moved in the last year and have come under what was a regular route at the time, who are now having to have their lives uprooted. And in addition to that, there's family resettlement, which has seemingly ended overnight without much fanfare. And we're seeing a continued authoritarian imposition on our right to protest and show international solidarity. And I think that's really been felt across the whole of the UK between migrants and citizen communities alike. And one thing that is really glaringly obvious when we talk about all of this is that a lot of this is being done without the political and legislative scrutiny, so they're done as policy inferences rather than through parliamentary procedure. And it's really clear that these policies that are being spearheaded and enacted have little to no regard for the direct human impact they have on the migrant communities they attack. On the contrary, I would say migrant lives are deemed as discardable in a growing attempt to appeal to the far-right rhetoric and voters. So rather than pursuing any real moves to reject their racist rhetoric and narrative, our political conversation has largely been dominated by throwing migrants under the bus over and over and over again. And it was just last week, actually, the Shadow Home Secretary, Katie Lamb, expressed her desire to retroactively revoke the settlement rights of millions of migrants, explicitly stating her desire that the presence of migrant communities have made the UK less culturally coherent. And I think those types of comments of not seeing enough white faces, they've really entered the political mainstream. And these were comments that used to be still wrongfully said in quiet backdoor conversations that are now proudly being said by shadow ministers and backbenchers with little political consequences. And really, this never-ending bombardment of racist rhetoric will not end as long as they don't have to answer to us. As long as they don't have to answer to the migrant community, there is little that will keep them in check. And it's clear that the government is unwilling to engage in dialogue with organisations and communities, choosing instead to make these decisions behind closed doors where they don't have to answer to their policy and decision-making process. And this lack of political accountability is really compounded by the issue that many migrant communities are currently locked out of our democratic landscape. So I will explain the intricacies of voter eligibility for a little bit, so please stay with me.
1 minute.
So at the moment, only British, Irish, and qualifying Commonwealth residents have the right to vote in national elections. In England and the North of Ireland, the franchise is narrowly extended to some EU nationals in local elections, but really this leaves millions of residents without the power to hold our politicians accountable. In Scotland and Wales, it's a little bit different. The right to vote has been extended to migrant communities, allowing thousands to access our democracy. And with the rise of the far right, millions of residents across Scotland and Wales will have the ability to make sure that the divisive and violent policies don't make it into Holyrood and the Senate in the local elections next year. But this same power isn't held by many migrant communities in England and the North of Ireland. Instead, citizenship remains really the only route for many communities outside the EU and Commonwealth to gain any voting rights. This citizenship that is getting harder and harder for us to acquire. And so without the ability to vote and shape the political conversation, political actors have even less incentive to listen to migrant voices and lives. And all too often, the rhetoric centers around this caricatured migrant, relying on the assumption that we lack the political agency to fight back. And politicians need to be held accountable at the ballot box, but also beyond, to the migrant communities they speak about. We deserve policies and legislation and politicians that cater to our needs and our lives, and not just those that constantly villainize us, so that decisions made about us aren't made without us in the room. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. There are a number of points in there that need to be, we're going to be exploring a bit later, but that's setting out what is wrong at the moment. A lot of us probably know, and some of you or your family members experience already this very increased, the high levels of visa fees, residency, because it really presents itself as a barrier for us to get a proper inclusion as well. We're going to now next to Jackie McKenzie, who's with us through Zoom. We believe we're going to make this work. We'll see if it does. Jackie, can you hear us? Just about. I think we're going to just tell her when to start, because I don't think she can hear us properly. So she's going to present, and we're going to do what we do in community. We struggle, don't we? And we find ways. So I'm here on WhatsApp telling her, go, and she will go, which is brilliant. Right, you can stand up. Because we didn't know that she, we weren't expecting it, but we'll make it work because it's so important to hear from Jackie.
Hi, I'm hoping that you can hear me or hear and see me. I've had a message from Claudia to start. Oh, right, someone put their hand up. Okay, fantastic.
Can we say hello to
Well, firstly, can I just thank you for inviting me to speak and apologise for not being there in person. I have really fond memories actually of Frampton Park Baptist Church going back many, many years. When I worked at Hackney Council, both in community development and urban regeneration, there were lots and lots of activities happening in the church hall and also on the estate. So I was really looking forward to seeing it today, which I think would be the first time in about 25 years. So I am sorry for myself, and I'm sorry to have let the organisers down not being there. I am unwell, and I'm hoping that I can hold up for long enough to say something that might make some sense. I haven't been able to follow the meeting so far because there is some issue with the technology and I'm not connected to the meeting. So I hope I'm not going to be repeating what previous speakers have said. I'll just touch on a couple of points for as long as my voice might hold. One of the things glaringly absent from the discussions on immigration and asylum in the UK is that everything that is said in a pejorative way and done is underpinned by racism. And we can find examples of how UK immigration policy and racism are intertwined. But I'm going to start, and that would be of no surprise to anybody who's heard me speak before, I'm going to start with the Windrush scandal, whose very origins emanate from 30 years of racist immigration legislation designed to do one thing, and that was to reduce Britain's white population. Very few of you will have been surprised by the findings and the historical roots of the Windrush scandal report, if you've seen this, published with an unnamed author. He describes how the British Empire, depending on racist ideology in order to function, which he says informed all the immigration laws passed in the post-war period. He concluded that the origins of the deep-rooted racism of the Windrush scandal lie in the fact that during the period 1950 to 1981, every single piece of immigration or citizenship legislation was designed, at least in part, to reduce the number of people with black or brown skin who were permitted to live and work in the UK. As a result, the experiences of Britain's black communities of the Home Office, of the law, of life in the UK, have been fundamentally different from those of white communities. And he goes on to say, major immigration legislation in 1962, 1968, and 1971, and I would add 1981 with the British Nationality Act, and 2007 with the Borders Act, and more, was designed to reduce the proportion of people living in the UK who did not have a white skin. He continues, the British Empire depended on racist ideology in order to function, which in turn produced legislation aimed at keeping racial and ethnic groups apart. From the beginning, concern was about one thing, and that was about skin colour. Now, we all know the history, but it is worth a quick restating to understand where we are today. We know that World War II had caused a huge shortage of labour, and that people were needed to assist the crumbling transport infrastructure and staff the newly created NHS. We hear this repeatedly in any introduction to the Windrush scandal. What we know less of is that the initial appeal for workers to fill these labour gaps and shortages was actually directed to white Europeans, the Irish, German and Italian prisoners of war and refugees from Eastern Europe. And not enough of them were coming, and plus a lot of white Brits were leaving, going to, create new lives in Australia and Canada and New Zealand, the States, even South Africa. And so, the country was in crisis. So when on the 27th of June 1948, the Windrush ship arrived, and 11 Labour Party members of Parliament sent to the then Prime Minister Colonel Attlee a letter which opposed the docking of the Windrush ship, and which claimed that an influx of coloured people domiciled in Britain was likely to impair the harmony and cohesion of public and social life and to cause unhappiness among all concerned. The words we see in the literature and in the archives of yesterday, a lack of community cohesion and difference and othering reflect the language of today, emanating from nearly every main political sphere. Nevertheless, for economic reasons only, the British Nationality Act of 1948 was actually enacted and provided British citizenship for people who lived in the colonies, despite efforts to end the free movement of those very same people. And of course, people started coming from the Caribbean, from West Africa mainly, India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka. And that was between the 1950s and the 1960s. The concern about the numbers of non-white population to Britain created such great unease amongst the political elites and the far right that we ended up with legislation in the 60s, which was to try and reduce all of that. And then we got the 1971 pièce de résistance of the Immigration Act, which literally underpins everything we're having now. But what is interesting about that period is that politicians and anti-migrant activists were talking about Britain's indigenous population needing to be saved from a migrant threat, despite the fact that Britain was always a nation of migrants. So we fast forward to the hostile environment, both its formal iteration under Thatcher's conservatism and its formal development as a policy under Blair's Labour, and its purpose. Its purpose is ostensibly to curb illegal migration. The mythology and ideology of borders aside, most of us will probably agree that there ought to be a framework for migration and immigration. But when you look at the facts, none of the laws or policies have really been about these frameworks. They have purely been about two things: keeping Britain white and winning elections. So the strategy works. Margaret Thatcher in 1979 went on a TV programme, I think it was called World in Action, and talked about being swamped by people from Pakistan, and she went on to win the election. In 2007, Liam Byrne, who was Labour's Minister for Immigration, announced a series of policies intended to create a much more hostile environment for undocumented migrants. And it was this policy, and that was a Labour Party policy, that acted as a precursor to Theresa May's formalisation of this, and the Conservatives putting it into their manifesto in 2010, which we saw a whole-scale rewriting of the laws, and that horrible Operation Backen, where bands were parading around parts of London where black and brown people live, ordering people to go home or face arrest and frighten people, and these massive deportation charters to India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Ghana, Nigeria, and Jamaica. Again, about keeping Britain white. Interestingly, interestingly, one of the reasons why we see so much attrition towards Albanians, who in the main are white people, Europeans, though not in the EU, is because over half of their population are Muslim. So I suppose to add to keep Britain white and keep Muslims out, we also need to add my brain fog with my flu. It's not just about keeping Britain white and winning elections, but it's also about keeping Muslims out, and we're seeing a steady increase in Islamophobia. So none of us should be surprised that Starmer and Labour are mimicking both Enoch Powell and the far right, as encapsulated by reform on the one hand, but sinister think tanks and media commentators on the other. And the current instrument to achieve this is the 2025 Immigration White Paper, which describes itself as a way of restoring control over the immigration system, but it's not going to do any such thing. And the proposals include increasing the qualifying period from 5 years to 10 years for most routes for settlement, what we also call indefinite leave to remain, with the possibility of earned settlement for those who make special contributions. So we hear this idea of good migrant versus bad migrant creeping into the language, because when asked to explain what these special contributions mean, we're told there's things like maybe you're volunteering. So you're a doctor, working 70-something hours a week, and you've got to go do a bit of volunteering at the weekend in order to get your indefinite leave to remain. Stricter financial requirements for students and the policing of universities. And we know this is an utter nonsense, because we know that these universities will mostly collapse, even the elite ones with large reserves, because much of their revenue comes from these overseas students who are milked by paying tens of thousands of pounds, sometimes for very little tuition, and some of that tuition being online. So it's a rip-off anyway, and yet they still want to hammer these poor students who come here. A new English language requirement with suggestions that this could be A-level standard. How many Brits could actually pass an A-level English language, and why on earth is that a requirement? It's almost like us, if we want to go to Spain or France, having to pass an A-level in French or Spanish. Almost impossible without several years of study, and at least the minimum 2-year period of study. Not necessarily at all, but there to other people and to create this horrible feeling amongst people. Increased fees, proposals to make it easier to refuse entry or asylum for those who allegedly break the rules and report foreign national offenders. Now this breaking of the rules, we now have Section 40 of the Nationality and Borders Act, which does actually criminalise the entry into the UK, the illegal entry into the UK, which conflates with the Refugee Convention, which actually announces, and we're a signatory, we don't write the thing, in the 1950s, or the 1940s actually, and that allows for people to claim or seek a safe haven in any way they can, including entering into countries without passports and without documents. I mean, if you're trying to escape the Taliban, you're not actually going to be able to avail yourself of a passport office and get your papers in order. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. And we have all these other, and I don't have much time, so I'm just going to go through a couple of them, but, no recourse to public funds, which means that already people who are in the system are having to live such awful lives, with no money and no access to benefits, even though they are already in the country legally. The delays, the trauma, the anxiety, the deporting of people who have lived all of their lives in the UK. You can be born in the UK and you can be deported. The mass hysteria, I mean, the thing we saw over Epping, I don't have any trouble with this one man who, was rightly found guilty, or he was found guilty, I don't know if he's rightly or wrongly, actually, I don't know anything about his case, but he was found guilty of the sexual assault, and he went to prison for that, and obviously he's been in the news again, or being let out of the prison and wandering around London for a bit. But, you had that one case, and I was doing quite a lot of media interviews about it, and one of the things I decided to do was to have a look at the data about violent offences in Epping, and I found that for this year alone, there'd been almost 400 violent offences in Epping, of which over 40, I think it was, the Ministry of Justice said 46, and the police data said 42, so we can take a mean somewhere. And so over 40 of those, for violent sexual offences. And there was no campaign by anyone in Epping to say, well, hold a minute, why is Epping violent? You know, what's the problem here in Epping? There were no women's groups rising up saying, well, we need to protect our, ourselves, and people saying we need to protect our women and children, and that sort of thing. It didn't happen. So it was obvious that this was just a contrived thing, mostly from people outside the area, just wanting to link this case of this one man to the fact that all asylum seekers are rapists or criminals, or we don't know who they are, they can't be trusted. And it was appalling, because the media ran with it and nobody dared ask those questions about what happened to the other 400 men who in Epping. And I went on Radio Essex, BBC Essex, and made this point, and you want to see the sort of hate mail I got coming into my email after I did that. And we've had just this week, haven't we, the dreadful Katie Lamb MP talking about millions of people who are settled in the UK, as if they've learned absolutely nothing from the Windrush scandal. And then we've got the perennial discussion about whether we should leave the ECHR, the Refugee Convention, again, instruments and treaties that Britain was instrumental because we are a humane society and have been historically. We were instrumental in creating these treaties and these documents. And we've got Labour threatening to chip away, and it's not going as far as talking about taking us out of the ECHR and Refugee Convention. But they're talking about chipping away. We had Lunkett the other day pop up from out of nowhere talking about perhaps coming out of Article 8, which obviously, if you're starting to talk about coming out of individual articles, eventually you want to come out of the whole thing. And it's such a nonsense, because very few asylum seekers ever get anywhere near needing to use the ECHR. The need to, and the move to curb successful appeals against deportation is a distortion. There are significant issues with the deportation of people who have lived in the UK most of their lives, and there needs to be an honest debate about it. But this debate about, some Albanian kid who can't go back to Albania because he can't eat chicken nuggets, or somebody who can't go back to Chile because they can. All of that's utter nonsense. Those things appear as a line in what are usually 20 to 30-page judgments of real sound reasoning that judges find in favour of people staying in the UK. And of course, even judges now, alongside joining us lawyers, are under attack for effectively doing our work. So the current debate is divorced from reality. The government knows it won't stop the boats, and they know the impact on deportation is negligible, but they are prepared to sacrifice the rights of 70 million people, that's all of us, who benefit, I've been told I've got a minute, who benefit largely from the ECHR, because we do, on the right to freedom of expression, freedom of speech, LGBTQ rights, etc. But yet, for the sake of perhaps getting another 20 to 30 people, because that's all it will be, based on research, out of the country, we want to tear up all these important treaties. So it's all a nonsense, it's all a distortion, and we're devoid of any sense of reality. I'll leave out a few chunks. I've been told, I have the finger and told I think that's 1 minute or something. But Britain could be sustainable. It could be driven by technology, by culture, which is strengthened because of its diversity. And instead, what we have are politicians and others pitting our communities against each other, destroying families, and almost in a masochistic way, destroying the very fabric of some of the very good things about Britain. And sadly, like the poor people in Jamaica are doing today, bracing themselves from the violent winds of Hurricane Melissa, and I don't belittle their experiences, I have roots and family and friends there, but we too must prepare for the ill winds of increased racism, Afrophobia, Islamophobia, fascism, and the pitting of communities against each other. We must be prepared to help in the education and the correcting of misinformation. Britain gets hardly anybody when it comes to asylum seekers. There are 120 million people displaced around the world. There are 1 million Rohingyas in Bangladesh. There are 2 million Venezuelans in Colombia. Most asylum seekers and refugees remain in the global south. We get about 40,000 people a year. It's an utter nonsense. And all of us who care about these issues, as I'm sure you all do, must play our part in trying to correct the misinformation and educate and provide education. Because that's the only way we're going to win hearts and change minds, because that's the job to be done. Thank you.
We're gonna, so we can give another round of applause because I think now we're going to hear some words. Wonderful. Right. Well, Jackie mentioned a few things that are very important. Can I just also at the same time invite a wonderful comrade that some of you might know, Jeremías, camarada Jeremías, por favor, please join us. Can we give us a round of applause for Jeremy? Please take a seat. So Jeremy, as always, he's always out and about with the community. So thank you so much, because I know you're coming from another place. We were just hearing from Jackie. We're going to go now to yourself, Visa, and then we are going to then go into groups. So we're going to hear, so we're going to hear him and maybe also hear your comments, Jeremy. But we have a final panel later. We're going to go into groups, and then we're going to come back in the last panel. Just before I go to you, I saw you nodding quite a bit. What's interesting, what Jackie said, and probably some of you know, Jackie is an expert in this area of work and the support that she gives for migrant communities and expertise to the Windrush communities as well. But something that really stuck with me, and it's my own lived experience, is the non-recourse to public funds, which is horrendous and disgusting. This very council in July voted to recognize migrant women with non-recourse to public funds. And which I don't believe is the intention, but just in a political theater that they couldn't support my amendment because I'm independent now, so they couldn't bring themselves to support it, and instead they voted against it, and that just is so wrong, and that's what we did today to fight back. Can we just hear back from you and I can give you a massive applause? I don't want to say your name wrong.
It's all right, no worries. Hi. Thank you so much, Claudia, and thank you everyone for coming. I'm really excited in terms of the format as well, so you're not just hearing from us, but we'll hear from yourselves as well about what commitment should be like for migrants, including refugees. So my name is Fiza Qureshi. I'm the CEO of the Migrants' Rights Network. We are a UK campaigning charity that stands in solidarity with migrants in their fight for rights and justice. So we work alongside migrants to build and co-create their campaigns in ways to where we're trying to dismantle the systems. We don't want reformation of these immigration systems that still will have harm and will be exclusionary and exclusive, but we want abolition of those systems because we want everyone to be free to move and no one to have to be forced to move as well. We've got a number of campaigns and activities. We have, on the stall, you can see some of the reports that we have, but we work with sponsored workers, co-hosting them to lead their own campaign around the very harmful sponsorship scheme that we have in the UK, and that just seems to be getting worse. The Not a Stranger campaign, which actually came about thanks to Keir Starmer's Island of Strangers speech, where migrants came together and were just irate about the immigration white paper proposals, and so we are offering like a space to kind of co-host and give them that platform and resources so that they can build their recommendations in the campaign themselves. Quite a lot of our work is around narrative and something that I'm going to cover and talk about now. And we call it our Words Matter campaign, which was very much about, like, let's tackle dehumanizing narratives, and now it's countering disinformation because it's just lies that are being told by politicians and the media and so-called influencers. But what we have also been doing is working with community organisers, because again, I'm glad you mentioned language justice, Claudia, but we have been very much thinking, well, everything we do is in English. What about these conversations around narratives, around migration, be happening in the language of the communities that are across London and beyond? And so those have been taking place quite excitingly. We don't call the Home Office anymore, we call it the Hostile Office, because that's all we have seen. And have many, a lot of research, analysis and campaigns around the increased criminalisation, the immigration raids that are taking place within our communities, the rising border surveillance, and when I talk about border surveillance, beyond the hostile environment policies, but tech again, which I'll come on to. And we have a report called Racist by Design. We're talking about all the laws that kind of Jackie mentioned as well, saying that right from the outset they were racist. And they were exclusionary, they were to keep people out. What I have is 3 points, although we could have made many, many more points about what migrants, including refugees, are battling in the UK at the moment. And obviously the first major one is the dehumanising narratives, as I mentioned, that's moved to disinformation. And I just wanted to share some of the headlines that we have witnessed on X, Twitter, whatever it was. We see in the headlines, obviously, politicians, that we've been trying to counter as well. So we had a tweet at us, which was an image of Ukrainians in the top saying these are refugees, and then an image of black and brown men, but these are not refugees. So there's a very clear, like, racial, Islamophobic kind of sentiments behind this. The language that are used by ministers, like swarm and invasion, which is mimicking the language of the 1900s. This is not, sadly, new language. It's just used for a new group of people. And then obviously the Island of Strangers kind of comment, which was reminiscent of the Rivers of Blood speech, right? This device, this idea, manufactured division of the UK. And now we're hearing a lot of, including politicians, talk about, and including the government, that people have legitimate concerns about migration, which we find problematic, because what are those concerns? So it's about housing and health. Well, how is a migrant who's arrived yesterday the cause of our the failing policies? So migration and migrants are the constant scapegoat, and disinformation is the new norm. And there are many examples of that deliberate creation and spread of false information about migrants and other marginalised groups that's been happening for decades now, it feels. But the disinformation is really relying on far-right ideologies and framing migrants as a threat to the country, to national security. And it's pushing these ideas of the Great Replacement theory, conspiracy theory, and nativism. And the repercussions of it, as we've seen, is the racist riots of last year. Then you start to see the ongoing ones outside asylum accommodation. And now you see it resulting in Operation Raise the Colours, which is meant to be about patriotism, but yes, actually seems to be about basically scaring off black and brown people in this country. And the harmful racist rhetoric is being weaponised. So you've gone from the Stop the Boats slogan, which was from the previous government, and it's turned into legislation. So slogans turn into policies and legislation, and then they start to criminalise people. So we've got the so-called Illegal Migration Act and the Nationality Borders Act, which Jackie mentioned, which basically make entry to the UK illegal, like unauthorised entry. So basically people coming on the boats who are coming here for refugee protection and sanctuary are now criminalised because of the routes they take. Now we've got the current government who's also pandering to that division by pushing the slogan, smash the gangs, and it's culminated in the border security bill. Well, what they've done is they've taken it a step further, and I have to say it seems to be something of a trend with a Labour government where they will bring in counter-terrorism into things. So they take it another notch, and they brought that into the immigration system with this bill. And now you've got the UK-France one-in, one-out agreement, which again is a problematic agreement. But what you've also been seeing is, through the Smash the Gangs slogan, the terrorising of migrant and racialised communities, especially business owners, particularly car wash owners, nail and hair salons, who are having and experiencing repeated immigration raids on their businesses. So when we talk about ICE over in America, ICE is very much here and it's happening, and they are raiding the businesses. And I was speaking to some owners just yesterday, and they were saying every 3 months we're expecting a raid to happen. And that's just not on. They should not be terrorising these migrant business owners. But what they've done is they've manufacturing this link between the small boat crossings and so-called illegal working in the country. So you're again seeing slogans going into policies and actions. The other point I want to talk about is the lack of political accountability for the disinformation and the lies. So what you are seeing and hearing are politicians and the media spouting racist comments and lies, where you had yesterday, was it yesterday or the day before, Sarah Pontian MP, Reform MP, talking about how she hates the idea of seeing black and brown people in adverts. And then you have Dawn Butler going into Parliament mentioning this and saying this is outrageous that a fellow politician is talking about saying these racist comments, and she's racist, and being told off repeatedly by the Speaker of the House and telling her to retract her comment against this member of Parliament. So I don't understand why aren't politicians allowed to hold their peers to account If she is saying something racist, then by default she is probably racist. But that's something that is still a problem, and there's no consequences for the disinformation, the lies, and the racism that some of the politicians are spouting. The final point I want to talk about, and I think it's very now, is the heightened and new border surveillance technologies. So many of the systems and technologies that are in an operation tend to be tested on migrants first, right? So we see the e-visa database. That was a migrant database that was created, and now suddenly we're going to have digital IDs. So databases start testing on a small group of people and then get bigger. But we have border surveillance. I mean, we have AI towers. I don't know if any of you are familiar, but the south coast of England actually has Anduril towers, and it's the same company that builds the same towers as the ones that are on the US-Mexico border. And they are apparently to protect and safeguard. So they are there to survey the channel, to check to see if there might be loss of life. And yet when we've asked questions of, well, what is it they're looking at? What footage do they take? Where is the data held? It's like I mean, there's just nothing shared with us. There is no footage. We don't share anything. It's not personal information. It's just blanket. No. This is all for the good of protecting people. And we also have drones in the channel. I mean, drones watching and mapping the boats coming across. And what we have identified through lawyers, speaking to lawyers, is that they are using the footage of the people in the boats to prosecute anyone who might have their hand on the tiller. So anyone who might be steering the boat is now being prosecuted through this technology. But we also have algorithms, which AI has also infiltrated everyone's life, and it's also part and parcel of the immigration system. So we know that it is being used in visa decision making. We know it will be used in asylum decision making because Keir Starmer has made it very clear he wants that to be part of it to make it more efficient, so-called efficient. And so these are just some of the routes that migrants are being surveilled and their privacy is being invaded at all points. And people are not creating the fuss that needs to be made around it. And it's not about saying, oh, well, it will come for us. It's about saying it should not be there for anyone. And I guess just finally, I feel like we're failing to push back against the narratives. And I have done an apology letter in the past to say we are not penetrating, we're not doing what we need to do. And we need to do so much more, basically, to be by sides of migrants and really show our allyship in these incredibly difficult times. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Well, Jackie is following us and she's making a few comments as well. Thank you so much. It was very powerful. Can I just say as well and give a massive round of applause for the work that you do about anti-race? And can we just give a massive applause because they actually make sure that police can know the court in an inhumane way. I have huge respect for the work that you do. We're going to go soon into groups. We're going to hear from Henry, then Jeremy. We're going to go into groups. That's what we want. What the community is that we want to see in the new party that is being formed, and then we're going to come back with feedback with Jeremy. We're going to change a little bit of time because we have extended time that is absolutely essential. As you see, we're not rushing anyone here because this is very important, and what you bring is so important for the livelihood of our communities. And when we go into groups, we're going to have translation because I'm aware that we're not simultaneously translating as we usually do. And can I also just add that we're also broadcasting for Express News, our Latin American newspaper. Thank you so much. Gracias, Efraín, por siempre estar con nosotros. Vamos a ir ya pronto en grupos. Henry, you are the General Secretary for IWG, a trade union that is predominantly working with migrant workers, and you're winning big fights in the gig economy, or against the gig economy. You're winning them all, that's right. So can we give a massive round of applause for the incredible IWG trade union?
Yeah, first of all, thank you very much for having me here tonight. I'm Henry Chango Lopez, the General Secretary of the IWGB Union, a union that represents predominantly migrant and the invisible workforce that keeps this country running like cleaners, like drivers, like securities, like couriers, and many other workers who, despite doing the hard work, people who, despite being applauded during the pandemic, saying that they are essential, they continue being exploited and on poverty pay and worse condition of employment. Our union started 30 years ago as a result of Latin American cleaners trying to find justice and trying to improve their workers' conditions. Since that day, we thought like the fight was going to be just in the workplace where we started, organizing also our own London for cleaners, but we found that the problem is bigger than that. There is a huge workforce that has been exploited. There is an underworld of exploitation that lots of people don't see. Cleaners who are the invisible workers that clean the offices, the buildings, drivers who keep the country running, couriers who deliver food in their houses, and they do an important work. And through over the years, we've been fighting big campaigns. We have taken on Uber, we have taken on delivery, we have taken on the government, and we have beat them. We have beat outsourcing, and we have improved massively the conditions of workers in workplaces that we represent. But we see that the struggle continue. Years after being involved in this struggle, I see that the situation is becoming worse and worse, especially with the gig economy, with the Uberization of the jobs. And it's something that we really need to be aware of, because that Uberization is coming to all of us. And if we don't fight for change, if we don't fight to stop this, tomorrow is going to be a day where everybody is going to have to fight for this. And at the IWGB, we also are a union that represents migrants and give them voices to fight against oppression, against exploitation, through building community and building solidarity. And this is something that has been very useful in order to fight our struggles in every workplace that we fight. And obviously, at the times that we live in, where the government and the right wing, the far right, are using again the message against migrants to use them as scapegoat for their political purposes, it is something that we should condemn and resist. The long-running agenda of this corporate class and the right-wing politics elites that try to stoke anti-migrant hatred and divide the workforce in our workplaces, but also in our communities. And it's such an important thing that we have to remind ourselves that we need to stand. We are one of those alternatives as a trade union that is fighting for migrants and for workers in this country. And we need to unite with other alternatives that are also fighting for real change in this society. We have seen the immigration status being used as for this government. Is it used as a tool to control workers, not to protect them? And that is something that we need to fight together. We need to stand together. We need to stand in solidarity with all these workers. It is hard. It is difficult to organize. It is hard to be outside the managers, outside this corporate organization like Uber. The government is more interested in the migrants that are trying to come into the country. But we have loads of migrants in this country that are paying taxes, and they still exploited. They still without the worst conditions of employment. Just a couple of weeks ago, we were outside TfL offices protesting because drivers have been put to wait for their license for months when they have to pay bills, they have to support the families. There has been a driver who even died of a heart attack because he was waiting for this license to come through. We've been outside the Mayor of London protesting as well in their events because we all day toast champagne with corporate organizations, corporate companies. Drivers have to go through difficult situations. And this is not just drivers. Obviously, there are workers like cleaners, who are migrants, who we've been supporting their struggles. Technology is changing and it's making lives of workers difficult in this country. We've seen that companies are using technology to get rid of workers, to make redundancies unneeded. And this is millionaire firms. But I think my message is to all the workers, we need to be part of this struggle. We need to be part of this change, because without us taking action, nothing is going to change. And one of those who started this struggle years ago as a migrant who came to this country to live a better life, and someone who has to get involved in order to create this change. And it has been a success, and our job is to build the next leaders of tomorrow, to make migrants believe that they shouldn't be scared for this anti-migrant rhetoric. But it is on us to do that. But we need everybody here. We need all the support for everybody to come out, stand up from the picket lines, stand up with those migrants who are afraid to speak up, who are being victimized by the employer sometimes, and also bosses who are taking advantage because of the laws and the policies that the government has introduced in terms of the anti-protest laws, anti-strike laws, and all of these barriers that are making even harder to fight our struggles. But we have shown that through solidarity, we have been able to make huge wins in many workplaces. And this is something that we will continue doing. We will continue fighting for change. But we need your support, and we need everybody to get involved in this struggle, because it's such an important thing, and it's so important that whoever is in power, whoever is leading the country, we shouldn't only rely on politicians to change that. We need to support them, we need to be with them, they need to be with us, they need to be supporting us, they need to be in our struggles, they need to be in the picket lines, they need to be in the protests that we are, they need to be standing side by side with the workers, with the migrants, and everybody who really want to change in this country. Thank you.
How are we doing? I can see some shocked faces too. We're hearing things that, I'm pretty, I know the work of IWGD. We can also support IWGD. If you're not even a member, we can be a support, isn't it? Because we really do need to support each other in the trade union movement. We're now going to hear from Jeremy. But before that, I just wanted to also add that it's really important what you just said around, we might not have an eyes here being shown on TV, but there is, as the last time I checked, there were 26,000 people that have been deported in the last year, and the Labour government is they're boasting about the number of people that they are deporting, unjust and in a humane, disgusting way. So thank you for bringing that up, because we don't see on TV, we don't have the mainstream media showing us the number of people being deported in their workplaces. Coming to the workplaces and being deported. It's so embarrassing and disgusting to see that actually being taken from their workplaces. Right. Jeremías, compañero. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you very much, I'll be very brief. Claudia, thank you very much for that, and thank you very much for your spirit, your energy, your determination, your friendship, and above all, the way in which you involve so many people in so many campaigns. You're an absolute gem in our society. Come on, let's hear it, Claudia. I don't know much nothing. Whenever there's a problem, well, I get two.
Yeah,
is that okay for the people recording something? I see, okay. Viva Latin America. Viva America Latina!
Yeah.
And thank you very much to all the others that have spoken, and I caught most of what Jackie McKenzie said. She's an old friend, and I think she's absolutely brilliant as a lawyer, and the way she manages to remove all the mystery around the law and sort of boils it down to the reality of human life and human existence. So I don't know if Jackie's still listening, but Jackie, if you are, thank you very, very much for everything that you do and what you said today. Thanks to Henry, to Fiza, to Zaya, for everything that's been said today. Last Saturday we had a big demonstration in Whitechapel and another demonstration in Hyde Park. I was at the Whitechapel one. We came out of the station, there were thousands of people there all along the Mile End Road, and they were there because there was a threat that the far right would arrive and repeat their problems that they've caused the community over many, many years. There was a huge and enormous community response to say that the far right are not welcome, they're not an answer to any of our problems. The same far right did in fact turn up in some numbers, I believe, in Hyde Park and Edgware Road and around that area on Saturday, and there was a massive police presence, and there weren't that many of the far right. But they are around and they are organising. And I think it's important that we understand two things. One is the message they're giving, and secondly, the need for us to have a coherent political alternative to the message that's been put by Farage and the far right within our society. Because if we don't, then the current horror story of brutality towards people who need humanity shown towards them will continue. The levels of inequality and poverty within our society will get worse, and the rights that all of us enjoy at the present time, all of which have been hard fought for, will be diminished, reduced and fundamentally taken away. I'll give you an example. Tomorrow in Parliament, Nigel Farage is introducing a private member's bill under the 10-minute rule procedure to take Britain out of the European Convention on Human Rights and out of the European Court of Human Rights. It will be opposed very strongly by a number of us, including me, and we will argue the case for remaining in the EHRC, remaining part of the European Court of Human Rights, and totally debunk this nonsense that somehow or other it's a foreign court that's interfering in our lives. It's not. It is part of our legal system. And through the European Convention on Human Rights, we've gained a great many rights. Rights of assembly, rights of free speech, rights of organisation, and we also have it as a court of last resort for fundamental abuses of human rights within our society, and perhaps equally importantly, that applies to 27 other countries across Europe where people who are suffering oppression, trade unionists, human rights activists, many, many other people can take their case to that court, which eventually will hopefully come to a decision which supports the principles of human rights. If we go away from it, and you then move into an era of Nigel Farage in government, Nigel Farage telling us that all our rights are complete nonsense, all that matters is people making money in society and wearing a flag, because he seems to think that these issues solve all problems. What they're doing is creating this atmosphere of hatred towards refugees and migrants, somehow or other pretending that the refugees and migrants are the ones that have caused the housing problems, the austerity programme, the lack of funding for education, for health, the lack of house building and all the other things. Everybody knows it's complete nonsense. Farage knows it's complete nonsense. It's utterly cynical what they are doing. And so when we oppose the racists, which we must, always must, we need to recognise that the massive contribution made to our society by migrant workers has given us the health service we've got, the education system we've got, the transport system we've got. It has made many people much better off. If you follow through the logic of Farage and others and remove everyone from this country who's living here with indefinite leave to remain, remove all those people that are applying to remain here, you would suddenly find that there wouldn't be hospital waiting lists of 2 or 3 million, there'd be 5 or 6 or more million than that, because there wouldn't be anybody to do the work in the hospitals. We need to grow up as a society and recognise that all of us have benefited massively from the contribution made by migrants and migrant workers in our society. And so recognise that, and also recognise that many of those workers are grotesquely exploited. Your organisation, your union, does a fantastic job organising people in the informal economy and the gig economy and so on. Great. And they should have all the rights that everybody else enjoys, but they're not getting them. They are exploited, grotesquely exploited, and then the employers know this as well, threatened with Home Office deportation and so on if they step out of line and start demanding decent pay, decent conditions and decent wages. That is no way to go forward as a society. When you fight an industrial case, if you're a worker and you take strike action, you have to all take strike action together. Because if you don't, you lose. You cannot win unless you've got unity in the workforce. And when that dispute takes place, that unity is irrespective of your colour, your nationality, your faith, or anything else. It's a unity of a group of workers trying to win decent pay and conditions. That is what unity has to look like. And so, opposing racism from the point of view of defending our multicultural society is very, very important. But it's also important to recognise that in some places the appeal of Farage, Robinson and others has some resonance, because they turn up in places where there's high levels of either unemployment or underemployment, very poor wages, often very badly run and badly funded public services. And somehow or other, this is all the fault of refugees, and Farage will soon tell them that. The reality is, in fighting racism, in opposing the divisions within our society, we've got to be equally strong, demanding an end to child poverty in our society. 3.5 million children in Britain living in poverty. The housing crisis in London, and it is a crisis, the housing crisis in London, at one end is people rough sleeping and spending their whole day hanging around tube stations trying to get enough money to pay for one night in a night shelter. And then they get the night in the night shelter, come out, and do it all again to try and raise £17 to get into a shelter for the next night. That is appalling in any kind of society. I was talking to a man last week who was asking for money for a night shelter, quite a long conversation with him. He told me about his life. Things had gone wrong. He'd got into rent arrears. He couldn't cope with things. He ended up being evicted. He ended up, because he was a single person, not eligible for housing, so he ended up rough sleeping. He then got ill. He clearly had huge levels of stress in his life. Is he a bad person? No. He's a human being that's had a bad luck and a bad time in life. Surely we don't need to condemn him. We need to support him so that he can get his life back on track, get somewhere to live, get a job and make his contribution to life. It's not rocket science that if you just ignore the needs of the poorest people, that's going to make it worse. It's going to make our society harsher and more cruel. And so housing is the key to it. Sadiq Khan has just announced he's going to reduce the level of social housing content of every new development in London down to 20%. And the government just told me last week, when I was challenging them on the private rented sector, that despite the good thing they've done in ending no-fault eviction in the private rented sector, they had no plans to control or regulate the private rented sector on the rent levels that are charged, because they saw the model for the future as big business investing in the private rented sector to make sure there was more of it. So that means Lloyds Bank and others are now buying up properties in order to go into the largely unregulated private rented sector, where they make a great deal of money. If you look on the website, you'll find flats for rent, Hackney, Islington, Town Hamlets, anywhere. You'll find many two-bedroom flats for £2,000 a month. Impossible for anyone on an average or normal wage. They cannot possibly afford that level of rent. So you end up with either people sharing or families living in grotesquely overcrowded conditions because they can't afford anywhere else and there's not enough council places for them. What then follows from that is family stress, is children underachieving in school, is mental health problems, and all the other things. If we want to live in a contented, society where people are able to look forward to a good future, you build the houses they need. You don't force them onto the walls of the private rented sector, and all the profits are being made by the exploitation of people's housing needs. Farage and company need to get real. What we need is not more private sector developments all over London. We need 100% social housing developments on the sites that are available to deal with the issue of the housing waiting list and all the other problems that go with it. And so there's so much more to say, but fundamentally it's about inequality within our society. There's a budget coming up on the 26th of November, and the financial experts have very conveniently announced today that because of a change in the growth prospects, there's a further 20 billion black hole, as they call it. And this then became a serious discussion about how many more cuts the Chancellor will make on the 26th of November to deal with this supposed black hole that's there. I can see what's coming. Less money for health, less money for education, less money for housing, but at no stage will they think about a wealth tax. At no stage will they think about raising corporation tax or the taxes on the very richest within our society. We're living in an era of the most grotesque levels of inequality and poverty in the fifth richest country in the world, and a government that has just also announced that it's going to spend 13 billion a year more on arms and weapons and so-called defence. Surely we can do things better and different, which is why we formed yourparty.uk, to provide that alternative of a coherent, collective society and political programme based on ending inequality and injustice in our society. And we will never descend to the level of Farage or of Starmer, quoting Enoch Powell, in appeasing racists within our society. All across Europe, the centre parties have learnt the lesson. You appease the far right, you lose. When you stand up to the far right, when you say they have no answers, they have no solution to any of our problems, all they do is divide and conquer. We will not allow them to divide, therefore they will not allow to be conquering us. Thank you very much. But it has to be quite quick, so I've got to be away for the other event.
Right, okay. That's brilliant.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Can we give a massive round of applause for our panel? Woo! Bravo. Massive applause to Henry for all the work that they do in the trade union, supporting workers. Jackie, who's in the phone, is still listening to us. Thank you, Jackie.
She's still there?
Yes, she's here. There you go. Hello, Jackie.
Hi, Jackie.
She's Jeremy. Oh, I
She's
think.
gone.
No, I think you hung up by mistake. It's all your fault. Remember you say that.
Everything's my fault.
Everything is your fault, Jeremy. That's the in-joke that we have. Yes, Jackie.
Hi, Jackie. Yeah, I'm on the platform now, and you've got about 200 people listening to you. So let's. All the best, Jackie. You've done absolutely.
You having a private chat, so I apologise.
Really good, Conrad. Okay, so we're gonna now, because you know, as a community we adapt. We have to value the timing. We're really grateful for this opportunity. The objective of the event today as well is that we as groups tell what we want the new party that is being formed to give our migrant communities. That's we're going to do that now. So we're going to divide into groups. We're going to go into groups 15 minutes, and then we're going to give feedback here to the man himself, Jeremy, and to what we want to see coming up in the new party. Can we just give a massive round of applause for an amazing panel? Thank you so much for today.
Lara, yeah, we did some workshop with Lara. And for the cleaners, for the couriers.
Incredible. I think you have some letters at the back, no? Brilliant. Okay. Well, we're going to go now into groups, and as we go into groups, we have wonderful. I think we have a Bolivian performance coming up. Yes? Are we ready for that? So please start getting yourself into groups. Do leave this middle a bit empty because we're going to have a performance, I think. Oh, let me just double check the time. Sorry, 1 second. What are we doing? 1 second.
Just really quickly, while people get into groups, I know we mentioned stuff around anti-raids and protest rights, so on our table over at the end we have some materials, both in English and Spanish for that, so please do grab them. Yeah, they're at the back, next to Rocket.
Thank you so much. And there's one.
In Finland? No, it's not working? I'm listening to the other translator today. Ay, no, muchas gracias, como siempre. ¿Este no funciona? ¿Hello? This doesn't work? Hello? Hello? Oh yeah, now it works. So, who's gonna go first?
Yo les traduzco a ustedes.
Oh yeah, el niño. Súper.
Gracias.
Wonderful.
Haz tu pregunta y yo la
Aquí.
pongo en inglés.
Okay.
No sé quién iba. Ah, el niño atrás, ok.
What we wrote down in our notes is that, like, about how migrants, how we should vote for migrants and how they should be allowed to stay in countries instead of like how in America they will get pushed back and told to go back by Donald Trump. And we need free speech so when we can speak for each other and migrants and refugees can speak for each other and for themselves. We should allow migrant students to work more than 20 hours. We should benefit migrants rather than risk. Not everyone has access to benefits, only when they have children, and stop the country from avoiding its international obligations. We should make it like so everyone knows about this party and how the migrants and refugees are always welcome. Yeah.
What's your name? What was his name, that boy?
What's your name?
Seychelles.
What was it? Seychelles.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm Jane. A couple of things came up in our group. The first one actually was that we really want to actually stress the positive role of migrants in our society. We want to see that coming out from your party and everybody else. You know, in terms of the fact that, for example, our local hospital is totally dependent on migrants, labour or people who moved here a lot earlier, actually. They're not all migrants, are they? But you know what I mean? It's like actually stress what people bring to our society and also stress that they pay tax, they pay national insurance, so why they're not allowed to vote, why they're being forced to pay levies on the NHS and all that sort of stuff. So I think that's the first thing we sort of came up with, is like actually push the positive and stop going on about islands of strangers and all the rest of it. The other thing is, which I'm kind of particularly interested in because I'm in Hackney National Education Union and Hackney Stand Up to Racism, is actually what we can do in the here and now in terms of pushing workers' rights and workers' ability to organise. And one thing that kind of I think has been really positive in the last few weeks is that I know in the NEU, and there's been huge amounts of censorship in schools, both over Palestine and over the far right, we're encouraging groups to set up anti-racist groups in school, both to protect migrant workers who do exist in schools, so probably not particularly in hospital, but also to press anti-racist curriculum. But we also know that Hackney council workers are setting up council workers against the far right, and at our local hospital, Homerton, which is fantastically dependent on absolutely brilliant staff, and I'm speaking from personal experience at the moment too, you know, actually they're set up at Homerton against the far right, and I think one thing we should do is both call up, you know, say nationally we want to push workers' rights and workers' organisation, but also actually go and do it in your own workplace, because I think actually that will start to spread the message from below, not just leaving it to above. So hope that's okay.
Thank you.
May I have one more
Yes, of course, yeah, briefly, yeah.
You know, in the time that it will take the new party to create the policies and then implement them, in the meantime, there is a lot of support work that has to be done supporting migrants. And I work as a volunteer with the Hackney Migrant Centre, and the staff of the Hackney Migrant Centre is down to 4 people now, and they cannot handle the workload of advice and support that needs to be done. So I would ask the policy to include instant funding to support organisations and advice organisations so they can help instantly.
Yes. What's your name? What's your name? What's your name? Sorry, Hillary. Thank you, Hillary. We have 2 more groups, and then we're going to hear back from. Yeah, you're making notes, Jeremy. I can see that. Something is happening with the microphone.
Hello, my name is Aja, and our group discussed how we should emphasise education, primarily in schools, primarily with young children. Someone in our group is a teacher who mentioned that children younger than 10 are being influenced by the far right. We must focus on dispelling propaganda. We must focus on giving the actual truth of what has happened within British history, who has helped contribute to building British history. We must remember that there are currently on the ground people who are working together. Someone gave a story of delivery drivers who were in Dalston who were being raided by immigration, and people actually came together to create a barricade and to prevent immigration from raiding the delivery drivers. And we must remind people that the everyday civilian has so much power. We must remind people that when we work together, we can change things. And if we focus, really focus on not getting distracted by the things that separate us, not getting caught up in rhetorics of separation, of us against them, of someone being the enemy, of someone taking away our resources. There are more than enough resources to go around for every single human being on this planet. We must focus on the truth, basically. We must focus on telling people the truth and telling people when they're being lied to. And we must focus on cultivating a narrative of making demands as people, as community, as people who know that people need help and support, as people who know that there are so many people falling through the gaps, so many people being left behind because we just do not have enough resources and because there is so much focus on separation. And our group basically highlighted how much we want to find avenues into cultivating just a sense of collective realization as much as we possibly can, as much as we possibly can return to the present of what we are up against. We should be doing that primarily before anything else. And we must remember that all of this benefits us as much as it does everyone else.
Thank you. We have another. Thank you so much. We have the last group at the end. Thank you.
Okay, I'll try and be quick. And there was lots and lots of stuff in my group, and I thank them. My name's Sasha. My dad was a refugee. My mum's an economic migrant. I'm very proud of that. Bless them. We first of all, we were talking about what we want from your party is not to give an inch to anti-migrant, anti-refugee racism. Right. Not 1 millimetre. Not in the sand. And this is very popular. This lie that you've got to concede. It's been blown out the water this weekend, actually. We had Catherine Connolly winning the Irish presidency on a progressive platform that refused to buckle down to anti-migrant racism. And we also had the Cavilli by-election on Friday, in which reform was going to be pushed by the pundits and the media and whatever. Labour followed reform attacking migrants. The Plaid Cymru candidate refused to indulge in anti-migrant racism. Guess what? He won because actually the majority are anti-racist. And let's keep this in mind. Despite the horrors of what I call the summer of hate that starts with Starmer's speech about Island of Strangers and whatever, ignites that whole discourse and the rights and whatever. Actually, there have been more people outside defending and standing with refugees than there have been attacking them. And I've been to Epping, and I've been to the Isle of Dogs, and I've been to Cheshire. People stand with migrants. It's not unpopular to do that. And we also talked about what we want in terms of your party to the relationship that it has to cultivate with other groups, because some in our group were very concerned that there would be a top-down approach to things, that your party would be absorbing things. But we know from tonight, the great speakers that we had tonight, that there are already groups that are working with migrants. Migrants are part of those groups. They know what they need. They know what the problems are, whatever. They need to be listened to. We need to cultivate a relationship with those groups. We don't rebuild the wheel, and we need to cooperate with this. A friend of ours also has talked about the fact that actually we need a relationship with migrants who at the minute cannot vote or whatever. We need to show them that your party is their party as much, even if they can't put a cross against the candidate now. And I think also, and I'll throw this in now, I didn't have time to talk about it in our group or whatever, we need to think that next year's election, next year's council election, will be a filthy election. There will be Reform expect to make a breakthrough. It will be Labour aping their racism. We've got to say, no way. We've got to stand candidates who say refugees are welcome here.
So we have two more quick contributions, because then we're gonna, I think.
Hello. This is two quite specific suggestions. I do agree with the terms of the tax reform. Basically, obviously, that the people, the rich, should be taxed properly, not as, especially the people of the city of London. And very important, that is that more of everybody in England have been affected by the universal credit. So it could be nice if the debates can be open in order to abolish it and to replace it by the universal basic income. There are a lot of people who cannot work. Many people cannot work, or they are training themselves. Many people are trying to study. There is no funding. In the university, there is no funding for research. Yes. So in order to put some public expenditure in the street, I would suggest, we were thinking about that, because some people literally cannot work in a situation, and universal credit is harassing, and in many circumstances, prosecuting people for being poor. Yes. So that, and from that, many things can get, as Enrique Dussel said, difficult things have to go little by little, but have to go somehow. Thank you.
Bravo. We have one more.
What was your name, sir?
What's nombre?
Your name?
Juan Cruz. We have one more, and then we wrap up with the feedback, and then we come. Hello.
Hello,
Hola.
happy set. We just had a few points that I wanted to kind of speak about. One of them was really highlighting the humanity of migrants beyond just their sort of economic contributions, but these are people, and the way that they're spoken about in the media at the moment is so dehumanizing. And also to push against sort of the scarcity mindset. Push against the scarcity mindset that migrants are the reason for the issues that affect workers across the country, and that migrant justice needs to be linked to broader systems within the society that we live in, and migrant justice is economic justice. And finally, just to say that giving migrants a voice and to allow them to kind of share their stories and really bring that humanity, but also giving them the ability to vote and allowing them to stand up for themselves. Thank you.
I think the My Home, My Vote is the one campaign. Last one, the end of one.
Hi, thank you. I'm sorry for taking up time when we're running out of it. My name is Camilla Zapata-Besso. I'm a barrister specialising in international human rights. I specialise in representing migrants and refugees who are facing removal, deportation, detention, destitution. I represent those who are suffering violence at the hands of the Home Office and the hands of the police. At the international level, I represent indigenous communities in Latin America and campesino communities. I was part of a group of Spanish-speaking individuals, and the resounding feeling was a feeling of fear. And of course there's a feeling of fear because the experience that communities have had, not just over the past couple of years, but over decades, has been an onslaught of more and more cruel migration policies in this country, which have snowballed and are now becoming a race to the bottom. We now see the threat of indefinitely leave to remain being scrapped. And I say this personally, your party should be making the positive case for humanity, explaining why asylum seekers should be allowed to work, for example. What are the economic benefits of that? Instead of allowing the system to continue whereby asylum seekers are forced into the invidious positions of being a drain on the economy when they could be contributing to it, and indeed where that would lead to social cohesion. Whereas at the moment, asylum seekers are languishing in hotels and accommodation, disparate communities, not allowed to work, not even allowed the privilege of making work friends. I see day in, day out the emotional toll this takes on individuals who have so much to offer, who have so much more to offer our society than they ask for. And lastly, an interest from our group was burden sharing. So, and it was something that Jeremy brought up, which is, I don't know actually if I can actually use it, Jeremy, it's one of the speakers, but the fact that countries in the global south take on most of the burden for refugees. And we were looking at the figures in one of the all-party documents. And one thing that interests me is how we can fight creatively and optimistically for an international system that really responds to what is coming our way with the climate crisis. The Refugee Convention, despite the fact that it has been so weakened around the world, is no longer fit for purpose. It was not designed with the climate crisis in mind. Migrant mass refugee outflows are going to get worse with the climate crisis, and the global north needs to be building a system that stops this crisis of protection. We're not in a migrant crisis, we're in a protection crisis. And starts to be a leader on how the world is going to respond to the amount of humanity we're going to have who have no homes, and how it's going to do so in a human way. And the UK should be a country that's leading that conversation.
No, sorry, 1 second, you have to run.
Well, I'll answer the question.
Jaime? So the Latin American group, I think here, the only Spanish-speaking translator, Jamie. Jaime? Breve. Gracias.
I take the time to do a quick research with some numbers because Nigel Farage doesn't differentiate between his wishes as a person and his political responsibility to the UK people. He claims that he will deport people with indefinite leave to remain. Let's clarify. People can be deported only if they commit criminal action with a sentence of 1 year and 1 day. Other people could be removed for different situations, irregularity, for instance. And if it has happened just to stop migrants coming to this country, it means that by the year 2050, under zero net migration, the UK working age population is projected to shrink significantly from about 41 million in 2025 to around 35 million in 2050. That means 15% of reduction. With continued net migration at current principal levels, around 340,000 people per year, that could maintain this needed working age citizens. The zero net migration scenario would lead to a workforce shortfall of about 6 million people by 2050. So he's wishing to move people away, but he's not considering the consequences for the UK people. In terms of asylum seekers, a quick research shows that Lebanon, with 6 million people, has 1.5 million refugees, which represents 25% of its own population. Colombia has 52 million people and 2,800,000 refugees, which represents 5.38% of its own population. Turkey, 85 million people, 3,100,000 refugees. It means 3.65% of its own people. Iran, 90 million people, 3,700,000 refugees, represents 4% of its own population. United Kingdom, 69 million people, 111 asylum seekers, that represent 0.16%.
Yeah, true. Yeah, thank you. That's it. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much for all the points that have been put, and they're very well put and very well made. Forming a new party is not an easy undertaking, I can assure you, because at one level you start with a blank sheet of paper, and that sounds incredibly attractive until you decide what to put on that blank sheet of paper. So what we did was an appeal which was essentially around the points of inequality is a curse on our society, the levels of poverty are huge, that we need to redress that imbalance by a number of things. One is obviously ending things like a two-child benefit cap, but also raising minimum wage, and rent controls in the private rented sector, much more housing provision, and crucially public ownership of major services like water, energy. And in all cases, I would not advocate the establishment of a national water company or something like that. I would want regional water companies, as we now have, owned by the workers and a combination of local authorities with trade union representation and all the rest with it. So we have a democratic accountability rather than the massive profit taking and the pollution that comes from privatisation of water. That's one of many examples. Also, to deal with the issues of the climate crisis, we would demand adherence to the net zero by 2030, and also recognise that the climate and environmental crisis does lead to health issues, does lead to huge pressures on the National Health Service through mental health pressures as well as physical health pressures. And also we need to end privatisation within public services, particularly local government and health, and have the NHS not run for the benefit of the private sector, but run entirely for the benefit of the people that need the NHS, and end all privatisation within it, and contracting out of services. There's an awful lot more to say on all of that, but that's the sort of general area we're looking at. And on global politics, I want peace in the world. I do not believe that building up another Cold War with China is actually going to solve anything. I do not believe another generation of nuclear weapons will make anybody safer. It will make the world infinitely much more dangerous. And instead of all this energy going into more and more money into arms companies, we actually need an investment for peace and refunding of the UN, World Food Programme, UNESCO, and all the other agencies. And I was a co-author of a book called The Monstrous Anger of the Guns, which exposed the arms trade, which spends $2.4 trillion per year on weapons. Not one of those weapons educates a child, heals the sick, deals with the climate crisis or anything else. All of that expenditure is a drain on social needs and social spending. So that's the sort of direction I'm coming from on international issues, and obviously full support for the people of Palestine. As long as it takes, we'll be there with the people of Palestine. Now, all of the points are made very, very strong and very, very good, and I absolutely feel a huge amount of empathy with all of them. The question of free speech, the question of the suppression of free speech is a huge one, and that's why I'll be opposing Farage tomorrow in his attempt to damage our human rights in our society, but it's also a question of being prepared to stand up and assert those rights to free speech and the rights to live in a society free from racism and free from racist harassment. Also emphasising the role that is made by migrants within our society. I emphasised that when I spoke earlier about the work within the NHS, within the education service, and so much else within our society, which must be understood and campaigned for and recognised all the time. And I thought the points made about education and schools and history teaching are very, very important. History teaching varies massively between schools. I'm actually most interested in history teaching in primary schools because it's that first impression and image that children get in those very formative 5 to 11 years old that actually influences an awful lot of their attitudes in the future. So I want our students to grow up feeling empowered. Feeling empowered instead of being told West Africa was a place that was once full of British colonies, it's now independent, and there's a lot of people living in poverty, end of. Completely failing to recognise the heroism of all those that fought against the slave trade in the 17th, 18th and 19th centuries in West Africa, those that campaigned for and gained independence in Senegal, Cote d'Ivoire, Ghana, Nigeria, and so on, and the vision that those independence leaders had, the vision that they had of the future, of what the future could be. So understand all of that, but also empower all of our children to understand the history of this country as well. Yes, there is an endless discussion about who was the king, who was the queen, how many children they had, how many castles they had, how much estates they've got, and so on and so on. And poor Prince Andrew is at the moment looking for a place to live. So if anybody's got a spare room, perhaps you can help him out. But let's look at it another way. The heroism of those people that fought against the Enclosure Acts, which took away the common land from people in the 18th and 19th century, which forced those workers to move to industrial centres where they were grotesquely exploited, but they formed trade unions and they fought back. The history of the London Dockers, the history of the East End of London, the history of this borough, and all the people that fought back to achieve better education, better housing and social justice. It's the same fight in Ghana, Nigeria, Senegal, Colombia, Jamaica, here. And so bring up our children to understand that you've got to speak out and really try and understand the real heroes in local history, those people that defended a community centre, that demanded a health centre, that got a nursery built, that got some land converted into a park rather than a car park, things like that. Because that is what empowers people. So I feel very passionately about the teaching of history in all of our schools. Now, the rise of the far right is obviously very, very serious, no question about that. And the history of the fight back against the far right is that you have to be prepared to say we're not accepting it. And I can promise you this, there's no way we're going to be conceding any ground to the far right whatsoever. Look across Europe. Thanks, but look across Europe. Far right in Spain, far right in Portugal, far right in Italy, France, Germany, Belgium, Austria, Netherlands, blah, blah, blah. Every country. I used to be a member of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, where I heard all these characters turning up from every country. Unbelievable stuff they were talking. Actually real fascist Nazi stuff in some cases. And then you find the conservative parties in all those countries, the equivalent of the British Tories, would say, well, they're not very nice people, but they're getting a lot of support, so we better move in that direction. Okay, so they move themselves 20 degrees to the right. The Social Democrat and Socialist parties, Labour Party included, think, oh, hang on, the population's moving to the right, we better move with them. So you then end up with Starmer quoting Enoch Powell about a nation of strangers. Enoch Powell, for the younger members of this audience, was a disgusting right-wing Tory racist in the 1960s who said he saw rivers of blood in the future if immigration carried on as it does into Britain. He said that in 1968, and he was misquoting stuff about the River Tiber in Rome. He said, I see the Tiber foaming with blood. And he was a very racist individual. And Starmer quoted him, because part of that speech also said, Britain is becoming a nation of strangers. That was the words he used, and Starmer used exactly the same words. They both knew exactly what they were saying, and they both knew exactly who they were appealing to in saying that. I see a nation of friends, of diversity, of people with different views and different history and different past. And so we're not going to go down that road. Now then, those parties that concede ground to the racists don't actually get rewarded by it. Because if you want to be a real racist, you're going to vote for a racist party. If you're anti-racist, you're not likely to vote for somebody that's conceding ground to the racists. So it's actually an absolute road to nowhere. That's their problem. We ain't going on a road to nowhere. We're going on a road which is about development, is about equality, is about changing things for the future, and I'm very determined to do that. The concern about this being a top-down party, not at all. I've had enough of top-down parties. I've lots of experience with top-down parties. And it's very hard trying to reform a top-down party from the top when all the people in between you and the bottom don't agree with you. It's fun, but it's difficult. I think you understand what I mean. And so, yes, it's about democracy. It is about development. And so we're signing up people to be members of the party at the moment. We have the conference, the establishment conference in Liverpool at the end of November, and that will set up the party. And we will be fighting the elections next May in London councils, all the other big cities in England, as well as Scotland and Wales and so on. Obviously, we're not going to do it on our own. Obviously, we can't do it on our own. We're not able or big enough yet. But we're going to work with other people. So we work with independent lifts. Great one here, for example. Whether they're in your party or not, we'll come to local agreements, we'll come to discussion. It's about building up from the grassroots and working with progressive organisations, working with sometimes other parties at the local level and so on. I'm interested in there being a big radical alternative in our politics and that we make a big contribution to that debate. But above all, it's about community. So you've got a community of people coming together, achieving things together. That's very strong. That's very, very powerful. We're not going to be the suited people that turn up every 5 years and promise you the earth and disappear for another 5 years. We're going to be part and parcel of the community. Sometimes it'll be complicated. Sometimes there'll be difficult local issues. That is life. Yeah. We are part of life and part of the community. But finish on this. It's about young people. Young people, over-tested, overstressed in school, told league tables are the only thing that matters, told that Ofsted is the most important thing to please, told if you want to go to university, be prepared for a 70 or £100,000 of debt and you might get a job at the end of it. And if you want somewhere to live, well, you're not going to get a mortgage, you've got 100,000 debt already, and you can't afford a private renter, so you better share, or maybe just stay with your parents till you're 50 or 60 or whatever. And so we're kind of just going backwards. We're just going away. I can see what's going on over there, yeah.
that hit, yes.
Yeah, and so we've got to be really serious about improving things for young people. I was in Tower Hamlets this morning and looking at what they're doing on youth services. Well done, Tower Hamlets. They're building 20 youth centres across the borough to give young people some space and some opportunity to do things after school. So there's so much to do. And so globally for peace and defending human rights and sustainable environment, equality and justice within our own society, no concession to the right, no concession to the racist, no conceding that kind of ground. And we challenge those that won't build the houses, we challenge those that won't deal with the poverty, and we will be that political alternative. And you know what? It's very exciting doing it. So see you all at your party. Thank you.
You're going to go, no?
Yeah, I've got to go.
Can I give you a big hug as you leave? We're going to have we have a raffle with the book, one of your books.
Yep.
So we have, you probably have to go soon. Can we
I've got to go very quickly.
Oh, you're going to take, oh.
No, you do it. You do it.
No, you do it.
Okay.
Democracia.
Democracy.
Democracy. So first, we're going to go straight to winners because of time, and we have
35.
The Bolivian group is going to dance. 35, 35. Please stay 2 minutes because we have a quick performance.
That's a chocolate. 35.
Dance for you. 35. Next one. 29. Chocolate for Gaza.
And the book, and Poetry for the Many is number 28.
Poetry for the Many, 28. Oh, Gladys. Right, and then we have just two more. So one more, sorry.
You draw them, you draw them.
Number 12. Who has number 12?
29.
Right, brilliant. Number 12 is the jam that Jeremy made. But we're going to post it to you because we left it in the office. So we're going to post it. Thank you, everyone. So we put the music, please, for the Bolivian group who's going to dance. La Diablada para nosotros. Thanks, everyone. So we put
What name is it?
some room for the performance, please. That's our closing moment. Thank you.
We're going to send the jam. 29.
You're welcome, Gladys.
Can we give a massive applause for La Diablada, who'll be waiting for an hour? Bless them for their performance. Thank you so much. And remember that there is a meeting in this week, similar to this one, on the 3rd of November, and we have the meeting in this week. Rock Tower, Shamleback Road, 7:30 p.m., 3rd November. Thanks, everyone. Right, La Diablada. And also remember we have the barcode here, so for all the ones to join to your party, go over and join. Here it is. 8:30.